So welcome, hello everyone. Welcome to our session. This is a session, the resilience of Antarctic Treaty System in the Anthropocene. The subsession 2, collaboration between science and law policy in protection Antarctic environment. My name is Osamu Inagaki, the researcher of Kobe University and co-chair of this session. Before introducing the first speaker, I'd like to mention a few housekeeping notes. First, if you want to ask a question, please use the QA function in Zoom. And second, this session will be recorded and made available to registered participants in the SPAR website. And please also note that the recorded video will not be available at the YouTube channel. Okay, so I'd like to move on to the first introduction of the first speaker. The first speaker is Professor Naomi Harada. Professor Naomi Harada is Professor of Center for International Cooperation, Atmosphere and Ocean Research Institute, the University Tokyo, Japan. Naomi has twice experiences to investigate in the Southern Ocean and Antarctica as a member of Japanese Antarctic Research Expedition. She will talk about basic research on functioning of marine life in Southern Ocean and its relationship to science policy. So you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Inagaki-san. So my name is Naomi Harada, a professor of the Atmosphere and Ocean Research Institute at the University of Tokyo. So I share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, I will start. So the title is the basic research on the functioning of marine life in the Southern Ocean and its relationship to science policy. So this is today's my presentation outline. The polar waters such as the Southern Ocean and the Arctic Ocean are a kind of extreme environment. Microorganisms living in the polar waters are expected to have some special function or capability. So I'd like to introduce about new findings in the Southern Ocean and the Arctic Ocean respectively. The number one is coming from the Southern Ocean, that nitrogen-fixing bacteria, which are thought to be adapted to oligotrophic environments in the tropics and subtropics ocean, have been found living in eutrophic environments, such as under sea ice around Antarctica, published by Shiozaki et al. The second, number two, is the finding from the Arctic Ocean. The phytoplankton, which belongs to Haptophyceae, living in the Arctic Ocean, was found to be capable of synthesizing a series of saturated hydrocarbons equivalent to fossil oil, published by myself. So simple question is rising. Can the Antarctic Treaty alone really sustain the rich Southern Ocean environment and marine ecosystem services into the future. The second question is, do we have to propose ideas for concrete solutions and reflect these ideas in the scientific policies of each country? So I would like to touch on the details of the new findings. This figure shows the nitrogen fixation and the gene UCYNA, which is the cyanobacterium gene abundance in the world ocean. Nitrogen fixation from the atmosphere is a primary source of reactive nitrogen in the ocean and one of the important processes of primary production in the global ocean. And nitrogen fixation has been believed to be a biological production that takes place only in equatorial and subtropical waters where dissolved nitrogen nutrients are scarce. However, this study has revealed that nitrogen-fixing organisms can also be found in dissolved nutrient-rich waters, such as those in Antarctica. This figure shows the maximum nitrogen fixation rates and nitrogen fixing community composing in the Southern Ocean and near the coastal Antarctica. The gene nitrogen fixing community was detected at all coastal stations, especially around ice-covered regions. At the stations where nitrogen fixation was detected, the nitrogen-fixing cyanobacterium gene was identical to that of the major oligotype in tropical and subtropical oceans. Our results suggest that marine nitrogen fixation is a ubiquitous process in the global ocean, and tropical and subtropical organisms are the key species for nitrogen fixation. Our findings represent a completely new and unconventional discovery that nitrogen-fixing organisms are also producing in Antarctica. Conventional future projection models do not reflect the production of these nitrogen-fixing producers and therefore underestimate overall basic production, which could change the value of ecosystem services around Antarctica in the future. So this is the next example, is a result from the Arctic Ocean. We discovered the phytoplankton Dicrateria rotunda, which is a species Haptophysi, can synthesize a series of unsaturated hydrocarbons with a carbon number which is equivalent to petroleum. A phytoplankton community was collected from the seawater of Chakchi Sea, from this red circle observation point during a science cruise of research vessel Mirai in the Arctic Ocean in 2013, from which we isolated and cultured the Arctic strain of Dicrateria rotunda. This Arctic strain contained a series of unsaturated hydrocarbons with a carbon number from C10 to C37, 38, which are categorized as petrol, diesel oil, and fuel oils. No organism capable of petroleum production has been previously reported. This study is a first to report on an organism with a capability to synthesize hydrocarbons equivalent to petroleum. The saturated hydrocarbon content of the Dicrateria rotunda increased under dark and nitrogen deficient conditions. Understanding the physiological function and the synthesis pathways of these saturated hydrocarbons may contribute to the development of biofuels in the future. So these two are an example of a new discovery from natural science. The discovery of marine organisms and their novel functions that defy conventional wisdom will be expected to continue in future. Some of these organisms and their products will be found to have a role as resources. Some countries might be conducting surveys and research in the Southern Ocean, in the waters around Antarctica, from the perspective of marine living resources exploration. This raises concerns about the devolving of polar marine life and its specific functions from a resource perspective as the world's population explores and countries vie for supremacy in scientific and technological innovation. The simple questions are rising. Antarctic Treaty prohibits the military use of Antarctica and provides for freedom of scientific research and international cooperation. Under the current Antarctic Treaty, there are no restrictions on research and surveys based on peaceful use and basic scientific exploration, even if the aim is to develop resources. Can the current Antarctic Treaty alone really sustain the rich Southern Ocean environment and marine ecosystem services into the future? Do we have to propose ideas for concrete solutions and reflect these ideas in the scientific policies of each countries? That's it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Harada. Thank you very much. We will have a QA session after the 50 minutes QA session after the first 3 presentations. So I would like to move to the second presentation. Professor Harada, could you stop sharing your screen?
Just a moment, please.
Okay. Thank you. So I would like to introduce the second presenter, Dr. Maruf. Dr. Maruf holds a LLM in Environment and Natural Resource Protection Law in 2018. And he recently graduated with a PhD in law of the sea at the Xiamen University in 2022. He is a member of the Working Group 6 on Underwater Noise at the Advisory Committee on Protection of the Sea. He will talk about examining the regulatory framework for protection of Antarctic marine environment and the Anthropocene, the case of anthropogenic underwater noise. So, Dr. Maruf, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good evening, everyone. So my name is Maruf. I'm from Indonesia. I graduated with my PhD in Law of the Sea from Xiamen University. And I also joined on the protection of the sea as a volunteer, actually, to work under Working Group 6 on the anthropogenic underwater noise. So it's really my high pleasure to be here. It's honorable for me. It's honorable. So I would like to also thank you very much for committee for giving me as early scholar, I think, early polar scholar in this session on the resilience of the Antarctic Treaty System in the Anthropocene era. So I can share my screen. Good. Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. All right. Well, my topic today is about exam. I have three.
Sorry?
Yes.
Sorry. We cannot hear your voice for a while, so please please start your presentation from the outset, could you?
Oh, all right. So what about now, Chair? Now. Hello.
Yes, and now I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. So apologies for this problem. So today we have my presentation. We have like three outline. First, I will talk about the background of this research, which talk about the control condition of the study, and then I will also discuss the for the protection of the Antarctic marine environment against this problem. In particular, I have to address this problem, and then finally, I will conclude this presentation. So I will just start my presentation. So the research background of the study, the contextual condition where we are in the Anthropocene era, the era where human-dominated activity, or we call it anthropogenic activity, have profoundly influenced and affected global marine environment. Anthropogenic underwater noise from several activities such as shipping activity, and then for exploration and also of natural resources, and also for fishing is an issue, an ongoing focus of government around the world and also across several nations under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, for instance, and then the convention, and then also the IMO meeting, for instance. So as an emerging issue, underwater noise will denote not only a rapid change in the marine environment, but also several and also inadequacy of existing instruments in the Anthropocene. Accordingly, there is an urgent need for further study on the development response and also enhance the protection of the marine environment in the Anthropocene era. So a central question to be addressed is, can the challenge posed by underwater noise be solved by the existing regulatory framework for the protection of the Antarctic marine environment? So before I discuss the framework, so I will just about the nature of anthropogenic underwater noise. This problem has received significant concern from international institutions. So there is also, such as for instance, the second World Ocean Assessment, which underwater noise has specifically discussed under separate chair. Then also the ICP report under United Nations General Assembly 2018, and then also CBD, and then also some scientific synthesis, and then also some regional also the report on underwater noise. So as a legal scholar, so for me it's quite challenging to read one by one a scientific study. That's why I think mostly report, official report, to understand the nature of underwater noise. To study noise, underwater noise has various sources, so can have several impact to a various taxonomic group. Such impact including such as behavioral change, and then physical, and then physiology, mortality, and also demographic. Even furthermore, according to the ICP report, the impact of underwater noise
Dr. Maru?
and then also from
Dr. Maru?
Can
you hear me?
Yes, yes, Chair.
Again, we cannot hear your voice for a while, so please slightly back in the presentation, and if you stop your video, the connection might be better.
Oh, all right. So begin from the source of anthropology in the Antarctic. Is it okay? Hello, Chair.
Yes, yes.
Oh, thank you. I apologize again. So, like in fishing activity, and then and also other sounds generating activity. However, according to the report, compared to other regions, underwater in the Antarctic has lower level in the Antarctic. And recently, also the SCAR has also published a report on anthropogenic noise in the Southern Ocean. An update actually in 2001. So according to the assessment, expert assessment of the state knowledge, so underwater noise in the Antarctic region is rated poor or lack of information, mostly including like for instance, and also several impact to the marine environment. Therefore, there is still very need for research study on the scientific knowledge or the nature of underwater noise in the Antarctic region. Okay, so I will continue my presentation on examining the Antarctic Treaty System and its applicability of the Antarctic marine environments, again, underwater noise. So firstly, I will discuss about the Antarctic Treaty. It has However, Article 11 stipulates further meeting several issues, including preservation of therefore, this meeting held in a forum, namely the Antarctic Treaty Consultative Meeting. So, given its mandate of protecting the environment, this meeting has adopted several instruments, which I will specifically discuss, namely the Convention on the Conservation of Antarctic Species, and then the Protocol on Environmental Protection, the Antarctic Treaty. So now I will try to examine the Madrid Protocol and its institutional response to the issue of anthropogenic underwater noise. So the objective of this protocol is to comprehensively protect the Antarctic marine environment, dependent and associated ecosystem, and also hereby designate Antarctica as a natural reserve and devoted from the protocol was designed to address environmental concerns and management challenge of the Antarctic region, and also set out the principle and standard for environmental protection. The scope of this protocol is has for instance, the word compare protection of Antarctic environment and dependent as an ecosystem. Some scholars they said that the scope is not limited to the Antarctic Treaty, but also extend beyond the ecosystem. This argument also supported one, for instance, on the enhancement of environmental protection up to the Antarctic convergence. And now I will talk about the environmental management under the Madrid Protocol and its applicability to address underwater noise. So Article 2 provide, I think, three important provisions, which I think useful to address underwater noise. One, the occasion for planning activity, and then second is the cumulative impact of activity, and then second is regular and also effective monitoring. For planning activity, three objective, I think. First is a detrimental change, to detrimental change in the distribution, activity or population of species of fauna and flora, and then also to avoid further jeopardy to endangered or threatened species or population species, and also to avoid degradation of substantial risk to area of biological science, historic aesthetics, or wilderness of significance. So as before that underwater has several impact to the marine environment, including Antarctic. So I think this provision can also apply to address underwater noise. And furthermore, Article Protocol also for the application of environmental impact assessments, which further stipulate or further specifically the next one on the procedure and requirement for the peer environmental impact assessment of all proposed activity. The issue of anthropogenic underwater noise can be or be applied on the EIA activity. And then Annex 5 of the protocol can be also applied to underwater noise in also management. And what about the arrangement and also the response? So here in my presentation, identified two institutions, namely the Committee for Environmental Protection, and then also the Antarctic. So the committee, which has objective to provide advice and also formulate recommendation to the party, its implementation, it has already several concern about the problem underwater noise since 2 decades. Therefore, it has requested to provide information related to underwater noise in the Southern Ocean 2000 and 2012, and then also 2013. And then in response, the SCAR has also provided and also submitted some reports about the state knowledge on underwater noise in the Southern Oceans. And then also has a workshop related to underwater noise in 2001, 2004, and also 2006, respectively. This response from institutional arrangements particularly affect to protect the Antarctic marine environment against underwater noise, as I described before. Provision or the third Convention on the Conservation of the Antarctic Marine Living Resources. So it is established, this convention has established a comprehensive for the conservation of marine living resources in the Southern Ocean and also the protection of the Antarctic marine ecosystem. It has objectives for conservation, but also allow for the rational use of marine living resources, which I believe that according to some scholars that it's become commonly understood fisheries management and also this convention. And also the convention established a commission for the conservation of living resources. This commission is to has conservation, protection, and also the protection of the marine environment and also management as stipulated in 2 and also 9. So Article 2 read that any harvesting be conducted within 3 principles. The first is the prevention of pollution, decrease of target species below sustainability. Is keeping ecological relationship between target and also related species while also restoring depleted stock. And a third one is avoiding risk of irreversible change in the Antarctic marine ecosystem that various other variable effect of environmental change with the objective of conserving the resources sustainability. So these three scholars to implicitly refer to the ecosystem and also precautionary approach, which I believe this also can be applied to the issue of underwater noise, since, as I mentioned before, like there is scientific knowledge on the Antarctic Ocean underwater noise. And for institutional,
Dr.
yes.
1 minute left for your presentation.
Hello, Chair.
Yes, now I can hear you.
Oh, I think so. Okay, so I will to the next station. I think on the challenge and also opportunity for regulating underwater noise in the Antarctic Treaty System. So what is also opportunity? So I think I identified a 3 challenge to address underwater noise. First is that anthropogenic underwater noise is not mentioned explicitly under the Madrid Protocol and also the CMLR Convention. Second one, specifically considered in the guideline for the designation and management existing protected area. And then third one is the lack of the implementation of mitigation measure to address this problem. However, there are some opportunities this problem within the Antarctic region. So first is environmental impact assessment or cumulative impact can be applied to address underwater noise. I think this EAA or cumulative impact assessment later for the next speaker. So next option is under the Annex 5, which area protection and management. There are two particular areas. One is the specially protected area, and then also Antarctic Special Management. The next option is the revising the guideline for the preparation of Antarctic Special Management Area management plan, and also and then the last option, coordination not only within the Antarctic, such as CAR, for instance, but also can also be applied through the other regimes such as Whaling Convention, for instance, and then Shigeru and also CMS. So this is my concluding remark. So Antarctic marine impact of underwater noise. However, I think just that further scientific study is important to understand the nature of the problem. And then the Antarctic Treaty System continuously to be the relevant instrument Anthropocene era for three conditions. First, although it's provide general obligation for the protection of the marine environment, treaty should also welcome all possible to address the emerging issue on the marine environment, such as noise. And then EIA and also protected area. And then third is the integration of underwater noise into the guidelines. And then finally, cooperation and also coordination have also important role in strengthening the protection of underwater noise. Thank you for your attention, and also apologize for.
Thank you very much, Dr. Maruf. Could you stop your screen sharing? Dr. Maruf? Could you stop screen sharing? Thank you very much.
Okay, then shall I introduce you, Osamu-san?
Thank you.
Yes, I'm a co-chair, the assistant co-chair. Thanks, Maruf. And the next speaker, we will move on to the next speaker, and I will briefly introduce the Osamu, Dr. Osamu Inagaki. Dr. Osamu Inagaki is a researcher at Polar Cooperative Research Center of Kobe University, Japan. And he's a member of a SCAL Standing Committee on Humanities and Social Sciences. And that today's title is the development of concept cumulative impact under the Antarctic Treaty System. So, Osamu-san, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for your introduction. My name is Osamu Inagaki, researcher of Kobe University. My major is international law, and the topic of my presentation today is cumulative impact. And it sounds very technical and very, very scientific, but my research interest is still from international legal perspective. First of all, what are the cumulative impact or effect? Actually, in fact, there is non-universally accepted definition of cumulative impact. The definition of cumulative impact has variations and included various elements. However, an important element of the cumulative impact in my presentation is combine the effect of different categories of human activity. For example, the combination of effect impact of fisheries and oil gas development. Then, why are the cumulative impact important? Why are the cumulative impact important? The simple answer to this question is assessing cumulative impact can one of the means to realize ecosystem approach, especially its important component, integrated management. Here, integrated management requires management of different categories of human activity integratively. However, the existing international law in principle regulate human activity based on their categories. For example, through establishing an international treaty addressing only specific category of human activity. This can be called sectoral management. While sectoral management can effectively address the impact of specific category of human activity, it overlooks the cumulative impact of various categories of human activity on the environment. The next question is how to address the cumulative impact. One of the means to address the cumulative impact is to assess the cumulative impact as a part of environmental impact assessment, EIA. However, existing EIA obligation international level usually focus on the impact of proposed activity only and do not consider the cumulative impact among proposed activities and other existing and future human activity on the same environment. Moreover, it is generally understood that evaluation of cumulative impact is scientifically and technically challenging, even at the domestic level. Despite these difficulties, recently the concept of cumulative impact has attracted attention in the ongoing two international negotiations. The first is the cumulative impact can be an element to be assessed in the EIA process in draft exploitation regulation now being negotiated within the International Seabed Authority, ISA. However, the draft regulation does not include a clear definition of cumulative impact. Second example is related with the new agreement on biological diversity area beyond the national jurisdiction. The cumulative impact can be an element to be taken into consideration as a part of the EIA process under the BBNJ negotiation. Also, the latest draft it was made publicly. It was released in June 2022. Includes the following cumulative impact definition. Here, it should be recorded that the Antarctic Treaty System has addressed cumulative impact since 1980s. By examining the development of concept cumulative impact within ATS, it might be possible to distill some lessons, and in particular the institutional conditions in which the cumulative impact can be assessed effectively and successfully. It was recommendation 14.2 adopted in 1987 that the ATS introduced the concept of cumulative impact for the first time in its history. The recommendation introduced a two-staged EIA procedure, initial environmental evaluation, and the comprehensive environmental evaluation, CEE. The recommendation requires that the CEE should include the consideration of cumulative impact of proposed activity in the light of existing activities and other non-planned activities. Moreover, 1988 Convention on Regulation of Mineral Resources Activities, CLAMRA, requires the consideration of cumulative impact in several provisions, including general principle. In the context of cumulative impacts, the most important instrument is 1991 Antarctic Treaty Environmental Protocol, Madrid Protocol. Madrid Protocol established the three-staged EIA procedure, preliminary stage, IEE, and CEE. The protocol requires IEE and CE shall include a consideration of cumulative impact in the light of existing and non-planned activities. However, the text of the protocol does not provide definition of cumulative impact. The concept of cumulative impact in Madrid Protocol has been elaborated by IEIA guidelines adopted by Antarctic Treaty Consultative Meeting, ATCM. The latest guidelines adopted in 2016 describe the assessment of cumulative impact as one of the hardest impact category to adequately identify in the EIA process, and still and also as still an emerging field. Also, the guidelines also define the cumulative impact as combined impact of past, present, reasonably foreseeable activities. As these activities may occur over time and space and can be addictive or interactive or synergetic. These activities may involve visit by multiple operator or repeated visit to the same site by same operator. Based on the definition, the guidelines emphasize that when attempting to identify cumulative, it is important to consider both spatial and temporal aspects to identify other activity which have occurring and could occur at the same site or within same area. Finally, in order to identify other activity at the same area, the guidelines encourage utilization of EIA database managed by a secretariat. Then I would like to tentatively examine the lessons from ATS's experience. Professor Keith Bastimeyer noted in his monograph on Madrid Protocol that the assessment of cumulative impact is only possible if there are data available on the past, present, future activity, their location, and their likely impacts. As this extract shows, information on the parties' activity and their location is essential in order to assess the cumulative impact. And therefore, the information sharing mechanism is very important for assessing cumulative impact. In this regard, there are rich information sharing mechanisms within ATS. For example, the obligation to make the CEE public available and the obligation to give advanced notice of their activities, and the obligation to exchange scientific information. Just at the least logically, it can be said that these information sharing mechanisms substantially assist the contracting parties in assessing cumulative impact within the ATS. However, to what extent substantially specific IEEs and CEEs have assessed cumulative impact so far needs to be further studied in future. This is my last slide. In this presentation, I try to distill the institutional conditions in which cumulative impact can be effectively and successfully assessed by examining experience of Antarctic Treaty System. Although my research is still in the middle, my tentative conclusion is that from legal and institutional perspective, in order to assess the cumulative impact effectively, at least a clear definition of the cumulative impact and robust information sharing mechanisms are necessary. This is my conclusion. Thank you for your listening.
Thank you, Osamu. So how do we proceed? Oh, it's the question and answer time. And there are some questions already on the Q&A, and I guess everyone can see this. And Yan, Dr. Yan, gave us a question for Naomi, questioning the ATS prevent party. So can I move on to this question first? The ATS prevents parties from developing patents on resources or biotechnologies that come from the ATS area. So this should normally avoid the use of such bacteria, shouldn't it? And yeah, Naomi did, I thought Naomi did answer it, but Naomi, can you answer?
Yes, yes.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, maybe my understanding about the 80 Antarctic treaties are not enough, but yes, the Antarctic and marine and biological resources are on fin fish, mollusks, and this kind of all other types of organisms, and including birds that exist south of the maybe 6 degrees south. I think these organisms is forbidden to conserve biomass resources. But the Antarctic treaties maybe current Antarctic treaties, I have no idea about the prohibit the development of or patent applications for even the special functions or capabilities of such living organisms, not biomass. The special functions and the capabilities are not prohibited to apply the patent or development. So that's why my presentation was thinking about we should have some kind of rule that would fairly distribute the profits gained from the Antarctic area. So this is my answer to the YAM.
Thank you. So,
Chair?
Yes, please.
Chair, this is Akiho Shibata. So may I, as a panelist, maybe follow up on some of the discussions now going on? Thank you. I'm looking through the Q&A and they are very interesting. I think we are now really engaging the scientists and lawyers and policymakers and discussions. I think this is the whole purpose of this session. Thank you very much. Harada-san, I think you are correct. Under the CAMLA, this is the Convention for the Antarctic Marine Living Resources, which is a part of the Antarctic Treaty System. Under the CAMLA, according to my view, all organisms are included within its scope. However, the convention not prohibit, but regulates harvesting activities. So only harvesting activities. So I don't know whether this petroleum producing organisms are also in Antarctica, but let's suppose they are. So they are, if they are living in the Antarctic Ocean, they are also part under the scope of the CAMLA. However, until they are harvested as resources, the CAMLA regulations would not come into to effect. So at the moment, it is only a scientific research on those organisms. And as long as it is a scientific research on all those organisms, of course, under the CAMLA, it is allowed. And also more fundamentally, Article 6 of the Antarctic Treaty, which provides that the freedom of the high seas of the Antarctic Ocean are preserved. So scientific research is one of the freedom of the high seas. Therefore, basically, it is free to do whatever the scientists want to do until it becomes a harvesting activities. But of course, under the CAMLA, they do have the marine protected area systems, for example. And if those specific mechanisms were implemented, some of the scientific activities might also be regulated according to the specific regulations under the NPAs. But I don't think the NPA would be established in order to protect those petroleum producing organisms in the Antarctica. I think that is the situation. And I also would like to ask Inagaki-san in this context that under the CAMLA, do you know any discussions regarding the cumulative effects of scientific activities of the ocean research activities? I know your talk was on the land, and most of the activities are scientific activities, and they are regulated as a cumulative impacts. But have you heard of anything of this kind in the ocean research activities? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. So far I haven't had any information that CAMLA is dealing with addressing cumulative impact issue so far. But I would like to make a further research on this issue. Now this presentation, I focus on the Madrid Protocol, so I need to make a further research on the camera. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And
Chair, if I may, I have a question to Maruf.
yes, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Maruf. It was very interesting, very new area of Antarctic governance, I think. This underwater noise, anthropogenic underwater noise is a global issue. And could you tell me if there's any specificity with regard to the Antarctic Ocean where we as policymakers or lawyers need to tackle this underwater noise, particularly in the Antarctic Ocean? I am asking you this one because I know the other pole, the Arctic, and in the Arctic, there's a discussion where those underwater noise may affect the marine mammals, and those marine mammals are very important resources for the indigenous peoples, and therefore in the Arctic Ocean, the underwater noise is a particularly a sensitive issue. Therefore, they are considering the issue very attentively now in the Arctic Council. Do you think the same kind of particularities is happening in the Antarctic Ocean? Thank you very much.
Professor, thank you so much for your question. So I think in the Antarctic region, as I mentioned before, there is some research already done there, especially for the impact of underwater noise in marine mammal. Especially, we have several research. However, for other marine life, for instance, like fisheries and also invertebrate, still like very few for research on this issue. So even though for marine mammal, there is still limited issue actually for this problem. However, as SCAR has, I think, continuously discussed about this issue, they are like gradually becoming like evidence that there is a problem of underwater noise, I think, on marine mammal. But there is, still need for increasing of in scientific research on this issue. But of course, yeah, some scholars they have also suggest for the implementation of EIA, I think, especially to conduct this kind, to prevent this activity. But to the best of my knowledge, I think there is still need for improving the scientific evidence to address this problem. I mean, to inform decision making for us, like policy, more specifically. But I think I believe that there is a still need for like scientific research on this in this problem. I think that's what it is.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maruf. So it's almost time for the next.
Okay, so we move on to the second half of the session. Okay, and thank you also for your question at the QA function. I will answer Dr. Julia Jabu and Ono-san's question in using the QA function. So I would like to move the fourth presentation in this session. The fourth presenter speaker is Professor Shigeru Aoki. Professor Shigeru Aoki is Associate Professor of Institute of Low Temperature Science, Hokkaido University, Japan. Shigeru is a physical oceanographer leading a Japanese expedition project. He was a member of steering committee of Antarctica and Global Climate System in the past. He will talk about the intensive observation campaign of Siberia coast, East Antarctica, to predict the future ice loss. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. I'm Shigeru Aoki, a physical oceanographer at Hokkaido University. I'm a bit awkward, feel a bit awkward to present a paper in this session, but it's my pleasure anyway to have the opportunity to introduce our scientific project at the Totten Glacier regions with a bunch of international colleagues here, listed here. So my talk is for the tackling for the sea level rise problem and the observation project of that. So it's the case study for providing the recent scientific activity to prove the effectiveness of the present Antarctic Treaty System on the global agenda. So it's about the global sea level rise. The sea level rise is of one of the largest global agenda of both natural and social sciences. And it's naturally, obviously, it needs the cooperation, international cooperation in action and research. So in its prediction for the future global sea level rise, there are two major uncertainties. One is the uncertainty of the future emissions of global greenhouse gases from our society, and the other one is our lack in knowledge of physical mechanism. And as the latter, the largest uncertainty lies in the Antarctic continent, the ice discharge from the Antarctica. So for the recent decades, we have been seeing the Antarctic ice mass is losing Antarctica losing its mass significantly. So we are seeing the ice loss from the West Antarctic region, and the recent studies indicates from the satellites, and recent study indicates that there are also a hotspot in the Totten Glacier regions in East Antarctica, which was used to be thought as the more stable. And this Totten Glacier has a potential of 3 to 4 meters sea level rise equivalent. So it's an urgent issue. So these two regions, West Antarctica and East Antarctica, the Ora Basin, has a kind of similarity. The ice beds topography in these regions are the sloping towards inland in the West Antarctica. And it has been said that this can cause the marine ice sheet instability that is anticipated. And it seems that the similar situation is applicable to the Aurora Basin in this region as well. The other condition is the warm water access near to the continental ice for both regions. And here in the West Antarctica, the warm water, the ACC flows near the coast, and circumpolar current flows near the coast. And it has been revealed that warm water can access to the ice shelf from below. And these situations have been extensively studied. However, in the East Antarctic region near the Totten Glacier, the observation is there has been only one observation so far. So there is still much to learn in this region. So that's we planned to go to these regions. So as for the Totten region, to learn the structure of the Totten near the Totten Glacier Ocean, the observation have been scarce. Except after the historical surveys by Russian historical observations, we have only 2 cruises to uncover the structure of ocean around here. And there is only 1 cruises approaches to the ice front. So there were a huge area left uncovered. So that's why we have to go here and to do the measurement in these regions. So Japanese expedition made observation in these regions. So one important agenda is how oceanic heat access to the ice from below, from the offshore oceanic heat, how warm water access through where. So the surface condition can be measured by the satellite, but the internal condition cannot be measured by satellite. We need to measure directly. So with the icebreaker, we made the profiling observations below the ocean and put some mooring time series measurement instrument at these regions. And our novel feature, novel tactics this time is to use the helicopter airborne measurement to measure the interior of the ocean. So this is actually the idea from US colleagues. So here is the sensor, and this is from helicopter. We can deploy the sensor, and this sensor can deploy the sensor into the ocean, and this system can transmit the data to the helicopter. So we can learn oceanic interior structure. So it's nice. And in addition to that, it's also nice to know the oceanic depths, the bathymetry from this instrument. So going to this uncovered area is very dangerous due to the risk of grounding. So captain usually doesn't want to go to the unsurveyed area. But once these airborne measurements done, we can know the ocean at enough depth. So that's very good for that's very relief for the captain. But good. And the other major theme is to uncover the detailed structure of the ocean floor. So we use the sound wave to learn the detailed structure of the bed topography from the ship. So for the seasons during 2019 to 2020, we did more or less the month-long observation in a heavy jam-packed sea ice region of the Totten Glacier region on the way and way back from the Showa Japanese wintering station Showa. As I said, we did the multi-nodal acoustic measurement for the bathymetric survey and did some hydrographic measurement of shipborne and airborne. And we deployed some time series observations as a mooring observation of instruments, as well as the Lagrangian float measurements as well. And we also did other measurements such as the paleo oceanography with the sampling the sediment cores to learn the paleo conditions, which is for the first time in these regions. So from these attempts, we could learn a lot about bathymetry and oceanic structure. So we saved a lot and uncovered the basic structure of the oceanic conditions here. So we did see here the relatively deep shelf edge with the deep basin, internal basins. And near the coast. It's shallower, but carved with a deep glacier, carved with valleys with glacier carved. The glacier carved the valleys. And in front of the Totten glacier ice front, we could find the very deep trough extending from from offshore to reach the very ice front of this depth. So this deep depth can transfer the warm water from offshore. And from the hydrography, we did find the basic two-layer system, which are called freshwater in the upper layer and warm saline layer in the lower layer. And that means that we could find the ubiquitous presence of warm water flowing from the offshore. And the warm water, with these the bunch of observations, we could find the warm enough water at any locations, deep enough for several hundred meters. So within the deep trough, we could find the ubiquitous. We could find warm water everywhere that can melt the ice from below. So this is a schematic of warm water, the seafloor structure, and warm water access to the ice shelf. So we could find, we could have significant scientific progress with this project under the multidisciplinary and international cooperation. But still, further evidence, especially for the temporal variations, longer-term variations of both oceanic structure and glacier response need to be covered. So we need to continue the ongoing observation in these regions. So this is the Totten Glacier is actually located at south of Australia, and Japan-led scientific activity is conducted at the ideal circumstances that Antarctic Treaty System works quite nicely. So our cooperation with Australia, US, and New Zealand colleagues has brought us very fruitful outcomes of both scientific ideas and logistic support. So the conclusion, it's almost not here, but international cooperation based on the Antarctic Treaty System is becoming more and more efficient and indispensable in this type of Antarctic issues of global impact. So to conclude, so we did a survey. We launched the survey of the Totten Glacier region, and this is the ongoing project. And we covered we have uncovered the basic structure of bathymetry and basic structure of the ocean structure. And these sort of international cooperations are very effective under the Antarctic Treaty System, and we need to continue this and make this system more firm, firm, and continue this structure. So this is the end of my talk. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Aoki Sensei, for your interesting presentation. I would like to move to the second, fifth speaker of this session. The fifth speaker is Mr. Keith Reed. Mr. Keith Reed is a marine scientist, has worked with British Antarctic Survey and the Secretariat Commission, the Secretariat of the Commission for the Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resources. He has participated in a number of TAMLA and Antarctic Consultative Meetings as a national delegate as a part of a secretariat. He has extensive experience of application of science and policy in Antarctic and Southern Ocean, and is the editor of SCAR Antarctic Environmental Portal. Thank you. If you are ready, please start your presentation.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for the invitation and the opportunity to speak in this session, which has been fascinating so far. I shall try and keep up the high standards. What I'm going to talk about is SCAR's Antarctic Environments Portal. I'm going to describe a little bit about what the portal is, what its role is, and how scientists can get involved, particularly in the role the portal has in linking science and policymakers. So the Antarctic Environments Portal is a web-based repository of information summaries on a range of issues of relevance to decision makers and policymakers that work in the Antarctic environmental space. The portal itself originated in the Committee for Environmental Protection. It was initially operated through the University of Canterbury in New Zealand, and then last year or the year before moved to SCAR, and now SCAR operates the portal. I became the editor last year, taking over from Neil Gilbert, who had been the editor through the transition from its original place into SCAR. And really the aim of the portal, as it's written here at least, is to provide the scientific information to promote the understanding and awareness, to support the policy and management decisions that are being made in the Antarctic Treaty System. I think importantly, we need to recognize that the portal does not provide policy advice. The SCAR is often asked to provide advice to the treaty system, but that would typically come via SCAR's Special Standing Committee on the Antarctic Treaty System. The portal really emphasizes just providing the background information to promote the understanding and awareness, to allow that discussion to go ahead, and for people who are not subject area experts to have somewhere they can go to find out what they need to know to help them engage in that science policy discussion. Given its role in providing that advice, we aim to publish all of the items on the portal in the 4 languages of the Antarctic Treaty System, so in English, Spanish, French, and Russian. That's an aspiration that we maintain, and indeed it's considered to be a really important element of delivering that background science, to be able to do it in those 4 languages. So the sorts of information that we present on the portal can be in a series of different realms, if you like, different subject areas. One of the most recent information summaries that we published earlier this year was the outcomes of the ANTERA SCAR program, looking at the 10 scientific messages on risk and opportunities for life in the Antarctic. And so on the portal, there is, you can see in the left-hand panel here, it's sort of concertinaed so that you can look at the authors, you can expand the overview and the different parts of the report. And importantly, from a science perspective, and I'll touch on this later, all of the articles that are published receive a DOI, so they are citable and includable in your CV, which is often quite an important consideration. Each of the information summaries is also accompanied by an infographic. You can see on the right-hand side here. And I think this is an important element as well, because sometimes even reading through a paper that's been written specifically for a particular audience, for people who may be time poor or just want something to look at quickly, I think the increasing use of and the increasing ability of scientists to work with graphic designers to produce these sorts of infographics is a really important aspect, and something that we would continue to support on the portal. And particularly for the outcomes of important SCAR programs like ANTERA, it's a useful vehicle to present those outcomes in a readily accessible form. Another aspect of the Antarctic Environments Portal is that we do have to make sure that our target audience is engaged. So this year at the Antarctic Treaty Meetings in Berlin, presented a paper on the portal to the CEP, and this is just some extracts from the responses from the CEP, recognizing the importance of the portal and really affirming SCAR's important role in producing that high quality, best available science to support decision makers. And these sorts of things I'm not putting here just to crow about them. As I said, I'm relatively new to the editor role, so much of the reputation and the standing of the portal is the result of those who have gone before me. It's my role to try and keep that going. But I think the important thing here is that it is recognized as an important source of information for bodies like the CEP. And there's an awful lot of science that goes on within the whole of the SCAR community and more broadly. And there's the challenge, I think, is synthesizing and thinning that down so that it's not overwhelming for those who are not scientists, but also so that they can understand some of the very important and in many cases very urgent scientific discussions that are going on. So given that I'm talking to largely a scientific audience, I think what I'd like to just focus on a little bit in closing is to try to encourage other scientists to get involved in this sort of thing and the benefits of doing so. Because we all know that decision-making in the Antarctic Treaty relies on having the best available science in all aspects of the Antarctic Treaty System. It doesn't always mean that having the best available science will lead to a decision. Frustratingly, at times, that's the case. But those decisions that are made in the treaty system really do rely on having that best available science. The challenge for many scientists is that the pressure on an academic career is to produce peer-reviewed publications. And while meeting papers for bodies like the CEP or for CAMLR may actually have quite a large impact on how things happen in the Antarctic and what management measures are put in place, they don't necessarily have a very high impact factor as you might view it from the perspective of scientific journals. So I would say that the Antarctic Environments Portal actually provides a mechanism to add value to research outcomes. So if you have publications that have policy relevance, rather than having to refactor those papers into a different form completely, a summary of the Antarctic Environments Portal is a way of accessing that target audience in the decision-making realm. So how would you go about getting involved? Well, one of the things that we're doing at the moment within the portal is our annual review of all of the information summaries that we have published already. There are some new ones, 3 new ones actually got published this week on sea ice, and we have another one on Antarctic krill that's just about to go into pre-publication as well. So we're in that review process and looking at new information summaries, we're always on the lookout for authors, either by invitation or even authors that write to me as the editor, and the email address is at the bottom of the slide there, who might want to become involved, who might think they have something which is of important policy relevance and would like to contribute to the portal. And we're always happy to hear from people who might be in that position. All of the information summaries on the portal are peer reviewed, so we're always on the lookout for reviewers. If you get an email from me asking you to review something, my only plea, well, apart from my plea is that you review it, is if you can't review it, please find someone else, or be honest about your expectations of being able to review it, because we try to get things published relatively quickly. And as anyone who's a journal editor will know, the peer review process can be quite challenging sometimes. Translations are an area that we're looking at in a number of aspects within SCAR. We do have fantastic in-kind support for the translations for papers that are in Spanish and French. We don't have any in-kind support for Russian translations, but we'd always be interested to hear from any Russian-speaking scientists that might want to contribute. And finally, the one thing I think that's really important is getting feedback from scientists who might go to the portal and read articles on there, but also getting feedback from non-subject area experts who might work in policy space, or in the context of this audience might work in the legal space, and getting feedback from them about whether we are delivering, whether we are hitting the target audience, because that's the sort of thing that will only help improve the portal in the future, and also improve our ability to deliver that science background to support those discussions and policy outcomes within the Antarctic Treaty System. So I'll stop there, and once again, just my thanks to the organisers of this session for the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Keith, for your presentation. Okay, so I would like to introduce the last speaker in this session. The last speaker is Professor Hitomi Kimura. Professor Hitomi Kimura is Associate Professor of International Domestic Environmental Law at Otsuma Women's University, Tokyo. Hitomi was a researcher at the IGS and the UFJ Institute, part-time lecturer at the Graduate School of University of Tokyo, and short visiting Exmouth University and the University of Sydney Law School. So if you are ready, please start your presentation.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction, and I hope you can see my slides.
Yes, I can see.
Thank you. The role of SCAR in climate science diplomacy under the Ukrainian crisis is my topic today. The Scientific Committee on Antarctic Research, so-called SCAR, defined its role to initiate, develop, and coordinate international scientific research and provide independent scientific advice to the ATCM and other organizations such as UNSCC, IPCC on science and conservation affecting the management of Antarctica and the Southern Ocean, and on the role of Antarctic region in the Earth system. This role of SCAR to provide linkage and liaison of its research program with others and promote science diplomacy has potential to reconsider interconnection in planetary changes, as well as to prevent conflicts and wars with national interests behind that alter the environment, such as in Ukraine. In particular, the Antarctica and the Southern Ocean do not have a high profile in IPCC. Thus, SCAR is well placed to provide a detailed policy and scientific assessment, and its report contributed to the IPCC for a fifth assessment report. Under the Committee for Environment Protection, CEP, SCAR has observer status as well as Commission for the Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resources, CAMLA, and the Council of Managers of National Antarctic Program, COMNAP, IPCC, IUCN, UNEP, and WMO have expert status. Therefore, SCAR should maximize its official roots in relation with, in particular, IPCC and WMO to further promote climate science diplomacy under the UNFCCC, to play a leading role in providing scientific knowledge on drastic changes and lead to the carbon neutral Antarctica and the globe. But who is responsible in achieving carbon neutral Antarctica, which freezes the terrestrial sovereignty based on the Article 4 of the Antarctic Treaty? Although the Antarctica has been dealt as an important sink in the global context, how could emissions from the tourism industry or scientific activities during their temporary stay be counted? If Japanese tourists, for example, fly to the Antarctica by Qantas's excess emissions are traded with other airlines based on the carbon offsetting and the reduction scheme for international aviation under the ICAO. If they take the Chinese tourism vessels emissions are reported as China's emissions to the IMO. But what about emissions by burning fossil fuels in the hotel in the Antarctica? This typical case illustrates the loophole or lack of law, especially on land activities, and difficulty in controlling man-made emissions in the Antarctica, which freezes the territorial sovereignty. And SCAR can provide useful advice to the ATCM on the burden sharing of emissions in the Antarctica. One question is to what extent the ATCM consider the obligation of the parties based on the common but differentiated responsibility under the Paris Agreement, where all states reduce emissions in accordance with their responsibility and capabilities. More obligation is required for the so-called the original 12 signatories than consultative parties. But metropolitan countries, in particular big emitters, are also responsible for their emissions. This year, microplastic were reported to be found in fresh Antarctic snow for the first time, and local scientific research stations could be considered as a source. And the dark-colored microplastic absorb sunlight and enhance local heating. In addition to the increasing role of a SCAR to interconnect the Antarctic climate change issue with the global matter, the Ukrainian crisis and its subsequent Russian participation to the international organization research collaboration, including in the Pole region, makes coordinating role of the SCAR more complex, challenging, and important. A few days after Russia's aggression on February 24th, Russian climate delegate apologized on behalf of all Russians who were not able to prevent the conflict as an individual at the FECC closed-door meeting to finalize the sixth assessment report. Ukraine, faced with the atrocities in Mariupol, asked to suspend the 14 listed here, international environmental agreements, including the termination of Russia's membership of the UNFCCC based on the Vienna Convention, as the international community seeks to exclude and isolate Russia from the international organization, insisting that Russia violates international law and human rights, although the full-scale invasion which radically changes the obligation of these agreements. According to the Ministry of Ecology and Natural Resources of Ukraine, Russia's invasion had hurt grain and the world's ability to adapt to climate change. The war has hit Ukraine's grain and sunflower oil production, damaged its forests and the wetland ecosystem, and forced it to spend money earmarked for the climate action on weapons. In response, in March, the umbrella group under the UNFCCC, consisting of US, Australia, Canada, Japan, Iceland, Israel, New Zealand, Norway, and Ukraine, but except Kazakhstan, which did not endorse its position, condemned the invasion of Ukraine and ejected Russia and Belarus from the coordinated negotiation bloc toward COP27 to be held this year in Egypt. And it is very unlikely as the host country to oppose Russia's participation in this case. More fundamentally, UNFCCC has no provision or authority to decide the participation of particular state for the host country, the Secretariat, nor the COP consisting of parties other than voluntary withdrawal from the agreement. Like other regimes, the UNFCCC nor the Antarctic Treaty does not suppose any such emergency situation, nor has relevant clause or article. However, in reality, it would not be easy to reach a consensus to incorporate such emergency clause under any other international environmental treaties or the Antarctic Treaty, despite the common understanding that the nature should be focused more than the human activities under the Anthropocene. In April, Russia submitted its inventory data to the UNFCCC as part of its obligation, which was worried and controversial on the international sanction against energy. The UNFCCC has not experienced the Cold War, nor has taken any drastic measures against sanctioned states so far, which has been always the case with more than 119 parties. In this sense, the war or crisis of a particular country might be more influential and visible among the smaller number of 54 parties, including the 29 with the consultative status, in particular the powerful original 12 signatories under the ATCCM or limited 8 Arctic states and the Arctic Council with Russia's presidency. UNFCCC has been influenced by the climate science, diplomacy, and politics as other environmental regime, but the tendency of relatively less or limited influence by the situation or condition outside the treaty or regime maybe comes from the fundamental understand the climate threat is as serious as war by affecting the survival of human beings itself, and as a consequence, this might strengthen the resilience of the UNFCCC. Behind the climate change issues, there's always the issue of energy issue. Ukraine war and a subsequent energy crisis, which maybe have already happened before the war with Russia. In particular, the global price hike of the natural gas posed a question toward a just energy transition path to carbon neutral by 2050, which was agreed at the COP26 in Glasgow. Some countries will accelerate their speed to expand renewable energy, but more fossil fuel dependent countries are forced to go back to coal and oil and reconsider nuclear power plant to restrict the diversity energy import from Russia from the energy security perspective. In addition to economic recovery from the COVID-19, global emissions is expected to increase after Ukraine crisis. To avoid temporal shelving and retard of a climate policy and keep the long-term ambitious target to achieve the carbon neutral, more support for just energy transition is necessary to cope with the negative impact of energy price hike and the lack of supply, in particular in developing countries and citizens, as flexible energy mix and pathways, depending on different circumstances of each country. Finally, I would like to conclude with a little bit different issue related to climate and biodiversity. With the increasing interest in polar regions play in the global climate and ecosystem, it is necessary to internationalize the ATS without drastic and total change of the regime, but strengthen the aspect of a common heritage of mankind, as outer space or deep seabed or atmosphere, but still controversial in a legal sense. Proposal by Australia, France, and Canada to seek international support to establish an Antarctic wilderness or wild pack. It is also worthwhile to reconsider under the Anthropocene. When tourist activity was recovered after the pandemic and its human environmental impact should not jeopardize climate and diversity in the region. But with the same reason, rather than spending a huge amount of time to discuss whether to hand over the control of the area from the Antarctic Treaty to the United Nations and recognize the Antarctica as global commons or CHM as in the past Malaysia proposed, it might be more realistic to think about how to modify the Antarctic Treaty to accommodate to the era of Anthropocene. The issue is who owns and is responsible for the Antarctica. The nexus and interconnection between the different issues is crucial under the Anthropocene in the Antarctica. In this sense, nature-based solution is the key to strengthen climate diversity nexus or linkage under the NSCCC, as well as the Convention of Biodiversity. As intergovernmental scientific science policy platform on biodiversity and ecosystem services, IPBES report mentions. By clearly adding new annex to on climate change under the Protocol on Environmental Protection to the Antarctic Treaty, in addition to the 6 annexes, the climate diversity nexus will be further strengthened. But how and who implement the operationalize the nature-based solution in the Antarctica? Antarctic specifically protected area under the protected Protocol on Environmental Protection to the Antarctic Treaty, Madrid Protocol, could be a solid basis to promote a nature-based solution in the Antarctica. Kamla's designation of the world's largest Ross Sea to the marine protected area, MPA, banning fishing for 35 years is a good model of nature-based solution. In a sense, the climate change may affect the rich biodiversity such as krill. However, the Antarctic specially protected area is not designed to aim for the promoting nature-based solutions. It is necessary to reach a consensus or daily adopt a resolution at the ATCM. In terms of human-nature relationships, Antarctica, with a limited number of scientists and tourists, but with the indigenous people, is relatively unaffected by human activity. This is a reason why nature-based solutions tend to focus less on the Antarctica. Therefore, it might be a good idea to start from the International Scientific Research Corporation among the willing claimants, non-claimants, and non-recognizing states jointly to develop a new pilot project, for example, around the basis involving human scientific activities along the Ross Sea, or incorporate a nature-based solution aspect to the existing areas without much human presence. It will also contribute to achieve the 30% reduction target of habitat areas expected under the CVD COP15 Part 2 to be held this November, in December in Montreal. More proactive action or contribution by human beings to restore nature in nature-based solution is additional aspect to the ecosystem approach for the conservation of nature. With that, and thank you very much for your time, and thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Okay, so we would like to use the rest of the time for Q&A session for especially the last 3 speakers. If you have a question, please use the Q&A function.
Co-chair, I think there's one person raising the hand, and you might want to ask her Monica,
I
whether
see.
she would like to have
Okay.
oral, verbal intervention. Thank you.
Yes, you can. Yes, please ask your questions. Thank you, Monica.
Okay, maybe she's
Maybe.
not there. Yes. Then co-chair, can I follow up on Dr. Keith Reed intervention in the question Q&A?
Yes, yes, please.
I asked him how the lawyers and the policy academia can motivate scientists to think about the policy relevance of their scientific work. And I mentioned how can I do that with regard to maybe Harada-san and Aoki sensei, who are doing great scientific work in Antarctica, but I'm sure that their work are not entered into the Antarctic Environments Portal. And Keith actually mentioned this document, CEP, ATCM, and Kamura, that this document shows the linkages between the scientific work and their policy relevance. So can I ask Keith, could you just summarize what kind of document it is, and what is your message to scientists like Naomi and Shigeru, that they can think about the policy relevance of their scientific work in Antarctica? Thank you.
Thank you, Akiho. It's an interesting discussion, and one we had yesterday in the Anti-Con Scats mini symposium. And the documents I'm referring to are the reports of those meetings, because they're publicly available, albeit a little after the meetings. But if scientists are interested in seeing what sort of science is on the agenda of those meetings and what's being requested, and in terms of the CEP, there's often annexes to its report setting out the sort of timetable and the 5-year plan when particular areas of science would likely be considered. So there's an opportunity there to identify. I could contribute to that. Yep, I'm interested in that. But knowing that science into the Antarctic Treaty System, whether it's the CEP, ATCM, or CAMLR, is very often delivered. Sometimes it's delivered by SCAR, but it's very often delivered by national delegations as well. And as I said in the mini symposium yesterday, those reports also contain at the back of those reports, there's a list of delegates with their email addresses. And you know, if you were a young scientist or an early career scientist, for example, in Japan, you'd be able to see the contact details for those people who are delivering that science or delivering that policy into those meetings. And I would definitely encourage people just to get in touch with them and have a conversation. Certainly in my experience, that's by far the most effective way of starting that process. And I also think that a lot of scientists, it's not a failure if you can't see how your science fits in to the policy space, because there's such a wealth, such a broad base of science that contributes in general, but doesn't necessarily all have an immediate impact in policy. But I think I would encourage people who are interested to have that conversation with those people who are representing that science and delivering it in those sorts of forums. Hopefully that addresses your question. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. is there any other questions from participants or panelists?
Maybe this might be a little bit out of the hand of Professor Aoki, but can I maybe just pose a possibility, this question? The oceanographic research activities sometimes have been identified by some politically oriented media that they might have some resource-oriented intentions in those ocean research activities, especially when they are going bottom of the ocean. And I know your case is not the bottom; it's the column of the ocean. So there will be no doubts that such a research can also have a certain resource-oriented. I mean the oil and gas intentions. But from your scientist view, is it clear that certain activities are clearly scientific activities and not resource-oriented, or can this kind of intentions be disguised within a scientific activities? Or how is it? How clearly distinguishable between purely scientific activities and resource intended activities in the oceans, especially if such activities might have some oil and gas identifying or exploring intentions. So what do you think? I'm sorry that this is not directly to your presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for your question. Fortunately or unfortunately, my major is in the physical oceanography of water. So I think that's not very much resources relevant as a bit. So in terms of the what is it? That sort of relationship, it's clear, but the areas like I did mention about the paleo or the sediment core measurement. That is a very gray area, and some sort of well, that is closely related to the oil drilling. And they are more or less used the same instrument. So it's very, yes, closely related. And the gray, I think we can say that is the gray area. So yes, it's there is what is it? The various tone of colors, but yeah, in the physical science, there is a very gray area to be related to the other very industry relationship. Yes, that's my answer.
Thank you very much. Yes, so that's very helpful for lawyers to think about the issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much for asking.
Thank you. Do you have any other question? I would like to ask one question to Professor Kimura. My question is very abstract and fundamental, but if you have any views, please share. My question is, how should environmental treaty react to the Ukraine the case like Ukrainian Russian invasion into Ukraine? So what is the right reaction to the such great violation of international law by one of the contracting party of environmental protocol, environmental treaty? Do nothing is one option, but some party dissatisfied with such reaction. But on the other hand, as Ukraine request, if the environmental treaty expel that country from the treaty, this also pose a serious problem to realize the common interest, for example, the common to realize interest, environmental protection. So what is the right way to react to such matter? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Inagaki Sensei, for your very useful question. And I was always, I was also thinking about the same question. How could the other environmental treaties should react or should not react? My answer, tentative answer is because the environmental treaty is not probably the direct place to solve the issue. The reaction could not probably reach some outcome. So that, but rather the environmental treaties can provide the place, even in such circumstances and situations, the place to talk between the various member states. And once the issue is solved, I think the environmental treaties could provide the venue or platform for the to negotiate the environmental issues. Of course, it's always the case, and even in the environmental related treaties, when some crisis happens, the member states criticize with each other and denounce. It happens as well under the UNSCC as well, but I have also seen such circumstances so far, not related to Ukraine, but also other cases as well. But even with that, the discussion, climate-related discussion have been continued under those treaties. So that is probably the role of environmental treaties, rather than solving the issue directly, but rather rely the other venues or organization or treaties to solve that issue. But in the meantime, it's important to provide the platform to continue discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your answer. Okay. If we do not have any other additional question, I would like to finish this session. Okay. Yes. Okay. Thank you very much for your participation and active involvement in discussion. And also thank you very much for your speakers for important presentation. Shall we take a screenshot okay, so please turn on your video. Okay, I will take a screenshot. So 1, 2, 3. Probably I took the. Please wait. Okay, I can successfully took the screenshot. So I will finish this session. Thank you very much for cooperation. Bye bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
どうもお疲れ様でした。まだ
ありがとうございます。
他の人は見て